Hello, this is David from DN Cognitive Counseling. As you know, many times I talk about substance abuse, and in substance abuse treatment, a very big part of substance abuse treatment is the 12 steps. It's been there for many years, and there's a lot of really good things that have come out of it. But the biggest issue that people have is, of course, the God concept. And you can work the program by being an atheist, and you can work the program by believing in God and a religion. It doesn't stop yourself from doing it either way. But a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions. And there is a YouTuber who has, shall we say, an interesting way of putting things. He's very affable. I actually enjoy his channel. But I have to say that there are things that I very strongly disagree with. And there's something that he talks about here, that he tries to give morality, the idea without God, and he does it in a way that I think is done very poorly and leaves the people with a lot more questions than answers. So I really want to break it down. His name is T1J. I mean, seems like a really nice guy, somebody I actually would love to have a conversation with. But I think that has, again, we have very different of opinion, but I think that his mindset here is just not correct. So with that in mind, I want to take a look at this and we will talk about this together.
I haven't done a video on this in a long time, so for all the new subscribers who didn't know, I am an atheist. And the question that atheists get asked very often, especially by Christians, accompanied by varying levels of snarkiness, is if there's no God, then what is the basis for morality? How do you know what is good and what is bad?
Now, right off the bat, he takes you off the rails. I don't know if you noticed it. He says what do a lot of people of religion ask is, what is your basis of morality? Where do you get your morality from? Then he turns it to what is morality, what is good and bad. That's two different questions. When a person says, where does your morality come from a religious standpoint, morality stems from the fact that there is a creator to the universe. The creator is the divine judge and will make decisions based upon your behaviors. It's the moral judge, in a sense. And what the religious person, or the person from a religious standpoint, is asking an atheist is, if there is no arbiter, if there is nobody saying this is good or bad at the end, then what is it? Then there is no good or bad. It's a matter of whether you have a decision you want to make. You could like something or dislike something as an individual, but then it's not good or bad. To give an example of this, supposing for a minute that eating chocolate was against the law, right? From divine law. I'm giving that as an example. And you ate chocolate. So from the standpoint of divine law, you have done something immoral. And the retribution will take place at some later date and time, or through a karmatic ideology if the world's created that way, or whatever your belief system of how the balance comes about. But whatever your belief system is, if it's a religious belief, you believe there's going to be an ultimate balance. Whether it takes place in the afterlife, whether it takes place after the second coming, whether it takes place, whatever your belief system is. But you believe there's going to be a balance. To an atheist, there is no arbiter of balance. There will be no balance between that. So you ate the chocolate. You got away with it. Nobody knows. Nobody cares. You did what you wanted. So the aspect of whether or not something is good or bad then becomes arbitrary. It becomes a situation of not whether or not it's moral. The question is whether or not I got away with something or not. So I just want to be aware, in his very first moments of asking a question, he asks two different questions and then switches the entire argument.
Now, before I attempt to respond to that, I want to take a closer look at that question. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to imply that if morality does exist, then God or religion or something like that must be the author of that morality.
Okay, number one, first off, that's not the case. You could have the idea that there's morality, that there's a God, an arbitrary aspect of judgment, who never told anybody any of what the rules would be. That is theoretically possible. That he gave you enough wisdom and ideology to be able to come up with morality on your own, and that you are going to be held to some sort of responsibility, even if he did not tell you what that morality was. That is theoretically a possibility. So I don't even accept the premise that therefore if there's a God, he must give you the morality that you are not responsible for. What you could say is God would have endowed me with the innate ability to understand that there is a right and a wrong. And then say, you now have to exercise it, and you'll be judged based upon how you exercise it. So you may have that internally inside of you without anybody ever telling you any rules. So you could believe in that aspect of morality from God without any aspect of any book or a book of rules telling you what morality is. So his premise, again, I have to disagree with.
For the purpose of the video, let's think of something that's immoral. How about murder? Can we agree that murdering people is a bad thing to do?
Can we agree that murder is a bad thing to do? No, I don't. I don't believe inherently you can come up with the idea that murder is a bad thing to do. You could say, I don't want to be murdered. You could say, I would not like my rights being violated, not like it. That doesn't make it immoral if there is no God. When a tiger eats and kills a gazelle, would anybody say he murdered him? Now you'll say, well, he needs to eat food. But there are many animals that kill just to kill. Meerkats are notorious for killing each other. No food, no territory, just because they're vicious. They're vicious meerkats. They do this in their behavior. Chimpanzees kill each other. You could look this both up as factual aspects on the internet. I was going to show the articles, but I'm not going to go through them because they're so basic you could just look them up. Army ants go and take over colonies and kill colonies out, and they march along. The nature, they do it more for food and survival, but still the aspect is that each aspect of an animal taking care of anything, or an animal kills for whatever reason, nobody calls it murder. And the reason why we don't call it murder, because we don't believe they have moral agency. It's not because animals can't do things that are quote-unquote not good or wrong. An animal could kill something or attack something that's bigger than it and end up dead. That's bad. But we don't say the animal did something immoral. When a lion, a group of lions kills a lion, we don't say the lions were wrong for what they did, even though they might be weaker as a society because they have one less lion to fight with. They might have been stronger had they kept that lion alive. But it's not about whether it's good or bad for the pride. The issue becomes, is it moral or not? And when we look at animals, we do not even ask the question of morality. We don't look at animal behavior as good or bad. It's an animal. It did its behavior. If your dog pees on your carpet, you might go over to your dog and say, bad dog. But what your dog's action was not immoral. There's no question about that. And if human beings are just high evolutionary animals, then why do we talk about morality at all? Maybe there is no morality. We might not like murder. We may make rules against murder. But that doesn't make it immoral just because you don't like it. So the nature is, can we all agree that it's immoral to murder? No, I can't agree to that. Now, you'll say to me, why is it immoral to murder? For a person from a religious standpoint is because you'll say that the rule of the aspect is there's a God who believes that there's an aspect of right and wrong, and that right and wrong will ultimately have a retribution. Now, I'll be held accountable to that in some way. Without that, and there is no accountability, then if I murdered somebody and nobody knew, no big deal. In fact, I got to take their stuff. It actually benefited me. And it actually made me happier in my life. So the aspect then, I could come up with scenarios where murdering somebody could be better. In fact, one of the greatest things that people are talking about now is our history. The United States of America would never have come around if they didn't murder other people. And good things, quote unquote, a country, the greatest country came out of that. So the aspect that you're going to be able to say that murder is inherently bad, ask a Spartan, is murder inherently bad? Is it morally wrong? Spartan would look at you and say, nope, we have a different morality, as they did. Ask a cannibal, is murder wrong? This idea of coming from a Judeo-Christian background, growing up in it, having a belief system in it, and then saying, well, I'm just going to start with your morality that you've came up with, and I'm going to use it as my own, and we'll just start like we agree that that's morality. No, you don't get to do that. Why is murder wrong?
I sure hope so. So God was the guy that was like, don't murder people, bro. Yet motherfuckers murder in the name of God all the damn time.
Now, atheists love to use this argument, but it's actually a false argument. It's not true. It is the aspect that, from depending on whose perspective you're looking at it from, that the other person would say, you murdered me. But even in terms of law, American law, when an army, the United States Army, goes into battle to kill somebody, you don't call it murder. It has a different definition. We are going to war. When you are going to conquer a land or you are going to conquer anything, nobody calls that murder. It's not the definition. It is conquest. Now, you may disagree about it, and you may have a difference of opinion on its moral backing of whether you're allowed to do it or not. But that's not murder. And from the aspect of morality, from reading of the biblical or Quran, they understood that there was a difference between the idea of taking my idea to kill you or going out to war to do something as a nation is very, very different. Also, the aspect is, it would be depending on what was God's will in certain situations. When somebody murdered somebody, right, the punishment was death. She'll say, how do you kill him? It's murder. Because it wasn't called murder. And just to help my friend out over here, in the words in the original biblical translation, the word kill and the word murder do not mean the same thing. And the biblical translation is thou shalt not murder, which has got nothing to do with thou shalt not kill. And people confuse those two things. And they think that anytime you kill somebody, it's murder. It's not true. And that's why it's understanding those definitions are very important, because you get then a misunderstanding of the actual reading, and because of that, you have a big problem in understanding morality, even from that perspective.
You may say, well, yeah, but they're doing it wrong. They're not actually doing what it says. But how come they don't know that? They're reading the same books and attending the same sermons that you are.
Now, here's something incredibly disingenuous. How could it be that somebody can get something wrong in a religion and have a disagreement in a religion that they got it right and they got it wrong? Well, obviously, if you read the biblical accounts, you see it all the time. In the stories in the actual Bible itself, where the masses kept getting it wrong. And it's something that happens in history over and over again. The masses can get things wrong and misunderstand things even when they're told, because our own desires get in the way. We all have something called free will. We all have our own desires for things. We like to come up with our answers before we even ask the question. So we want things to be a certain way. So we look for that answer, and we look for it to be a certain way. So our own moral failings get in the way of the way the things that we're told. So yes, you could have somebody look at the biblical account of something and say, look, it says this here, and they utilize that, and because of that, they take it out of context to create something that's wrong. Happens all the time. That doesn't change what morality is.
Frankly, I've read some of these books. I can see where they're getting the ideas from. The point is, if religion is the guidebook for morality, it's a very bad one. It's very unclear.
And here I'm going to have to agree with him. When you read the Bible and you just pick it up and you just read it, you are going to make a bunch of mistakes. The Bible was not written as a book for you to pick up and read and be able to understand inherently by yourself. In the Bible it says, you shall take an eye for an eye. You read that and you go, wow, if somebody takes an eye out, you must take their eye out. But nowhere, ever, in Jewish law, which originally where the Bible came from, did they ever do that? Never. Not from the very beginning. So I'm confused. Why was it written that way? What is the purpose? And if you understand the religion and you studied it, you'd have a much better sense and understanding of where they're coming from. Same thing in Christianity. People don't understand its own doctrines because what happens is you take things out of context and you read a sentence and you go, look, it says this here, without understanding its context and its meaning. And this is why it's so easy to take religions and make fun of them and to pick them apart. Because what you can do is not even understand what it's telling you. And in a sense, that's what a lot of atheists do. They pick apart the aspects of things they don't even understand what they're talking about in the religious doctrine and don't understand, as he's going to bring up a couple of things in a minute.
You know what? You could almost say that the sheer amount of shitheads in the world is in of itself proof of God. Because a bunch of shitty, terrible people running around everywhere might be the result of a God who was really bad at telling people what to do.
That's very interesting. So we are now going to allow human free choice to determine God's dominance over the world. Now, if he understood anything from a religious standpoint, the first thing and the first reason why he created man, according to any sort of religious text, and this is true of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. It's also pretty much true of the Eastern religions as well, is that men generally have an aspect, not all, but some, men have an aspect of choice and free choice. And what we're doing is we're exercising our free choice. So we have the choice to rebel. We have the choice to say no. We have the choice, as he says, to be really bad human beings. We have that free choice. And because we have that free choice, it creates us the ability to do really bad things.
Of course, most people don't think that God is inept, so I guess not. Secondly, why did God decide that murder was bad and not good? If God had good reasons to make certain things good and certain things bad, shouldn't we be able to halfway understand those reasons? And if they're...
That's a great point, right? And that's the reason why people spend their entire lives studying a religion, because they don't have a simplistic ideology of it. They have a much deeper understanding of it that actually where they start to understand where the pieces fall into place. Now, even when you understand religions as an individual, you may still say, well, I disagree with this. Now, I want you to think about that for a minute. I disagree with this. Now, if God exists, let's just take that as an if for a minute. If God exists, saying I disagree with God doesn't really put you in a good spot. Because if the creator of the universe, who decided everything is going to be a specific way, and through the infinite wisdom and ideology that God would be coming up with, then your understanding of things would be minuscule comparatively to that entity. So your idea about why this is done is pretty almost insignificant in terms of ideology to that. So saying, well, I don't understand, why did God do this way, is pretty much almost, think about an ant trying to understand human morality. Or an ant understanding why humans do behaviorally what they do. Now, if an ant to a human being, think about us to God. The big problem is human beings think they are God. For those people that are, specifically atheists, they constantly talk about things from a godlike perspective. You ever hear Richard Dawkins talk? I don't know anybody else who speaks more like God than Richard Dawkins. He defines everything. And he defines it as if he is the arbiter of those definitions. And that's what generally is happening here. There's an aspect here of defining things based upon my defined definition, which is nice. Doesn't mean people are going to agree.
There are reasons. Shouldn't those reasons be able to stand on their own regardless of who's the one dictating it to you?
No. Again, if you believe that there's a God, and God then says to you, as I'm going to use the biblical analogy of what took place with Abraham, and God says to Abraham, take your oldest child and sacrifice him. Oh my God, what's crazy? It's insane. Why would God do such a thing? Now, I'm going to be honest, I have no clue. But the aspect is, whatever God's intention was, it created something in him that he considered to be good. But from a standpoint of an outsider, God, that's a cruel God. To take your child and to have to put him for sacrifice, that's insane. That's evil. And therefore now you start judging God as you are God. You become God now to make judgments about God, about how you determine things should be, and how you believe the world should work.
When I was a kid, my mom told me to brush my teeth. And I still brush my teeth, but not because my mom told me to a long time ago, but because there were actual reasons to do that still hold up. Was it just...
By the way, that's great that his mom told him to brush his teeth and he still does it. And there are reasons to do it. There are a lot of adults that don't. And a lot of adults have issues because of it. But that doesn't make it moral or immoral. Nobody's going to say, oh my God, you are so immoral. You didn't brush your teeth. You got a cavity. It's a consequence. He's actually making a case against the idea of morality. What he's saying basically is that brushing your teeth was a good thing to do, and you should do it because it's a good thing. Which, by the way, I agree with. But brushing your teeth is not a moral issue.
It's an arbitrary choice to add murder to the bad list, or is that just another one of those mysterious things that we'll never know? And keep in mind, I say this half-heartedly because there's a shit ton of God-sanctioned...
Oh, I love that one. I love this one. There's just going to be some things we just never know. Again, with the idea is that if God exists, therefore I, in my head, should be able to understand everything about God. Talk about ego. Now, again, you could still believe there is no God. You could believe that, atheism is absolutely a rational point of view. You have every right to come up with rational arguments why you believe that's the case. In fact, there are much better ones. I might do a video on that one. There's one by Sam Harris where he goes through a much stronger argument in reference to why he doesn't believe in God, which is a much stronger argument. But what my friend over here is saying, and again, not well, is all of these things he's throwing at you are all straw men to be knocked down like really simply. They're just not even true. They're arguments based upon a thing that's all just falling down on each other. There are premises here that are not agreeable, that there's a lack of understanding about the basic tenets of what a religion is and what it actually means, and the very nature of his morality is based upon the very things he's criticizing. Because he'll say, wow, Judeo-Christian values were just normal to everybody. No, they weren't. Take a look at Egyptian culture and Greek culture. Take a look at the murders the Spartans did. Take a look how they treated people, what the Aztecs did in human sacrifice. Those were part of human conditions that were normal. This was not the norm. Judeo-Christian values is absolutely against the norm. It became the norm because of the fact that it was God, quote unquote, as the idea of somehow telling us that there was this right and wrong. So in actuality, more the spread of Christianity through all the nations that have brought the Judeo-Christian ideology to everybody else, as Islam joined 1,000 years later, with also similar ideology. And if you take a look at those numbers, that's the astronomical aspect of where morality stands from its basis. Now, from there, you could start making criticisms and disagreements. But sometimes when you disagree, you also become something that's very amoral. But we could talk about that another time.
Murder in the holy books of most of the world's major religions. But I digress. Could theoretically God have decided that murder was good and that it was our duty to murder people as much as possible, and today we'd just be murdering people all the time? Well, I don't think so. And
again, could there have been a situation where God set up a world that murder was good? The answer is yes. In fact, from the standpoint of Nazi Germany, the aspect of the Aryan, the whole concept of that comes from the idea, the belief is that as you have the survival of the fittest and the greatest, and then you battle each other, you're going to have who's going to be superior to who, which you'll have superior men all over the place. That was its ideology. So to say that's not a morality that anybody would have is untrue. There are countries that had that morality as a mindset. But again, we take for granted that what we have here just magically appeared. And that's the problem of the issue that's not being answered. We know where religious people get their morality from. Whether they're right or wrong is irrelevant. Whether they have the right morality or they're making their mistakes in morality, they still believe that their morality stems from something. It comes from a place. It comes from the idea that there's a God. Once I know that there's a God, there's a morality. Okay? Whatever is in that morality, you could argue. But without that, what is morality? There is no morality. There's things that I like, things that are beneficial to me. There are things that, like brushing my teeth. There are things that are good for me, but not good from a moral standpoint, because there isn't a moral issue. It's, again, going back to the fact that we're just intelligent animals. And animals have no morality. There's no morality when it comes to animals. So just because we have intelligence, why does that make morality?
I think that's exactly why people tend to ignore all the crazy shit in the Bible and the Quran, because we know that shit isn't cool. There's lots of examples.
The reason why people ignore the stuff in the Quran and the Bible is because they don't even know how to read it. They don't understand it. They don't go to its deeper understanding of things, because these things were not written. There's a reason why the Catholic Church did not allow people to read the Bible for a long period of time. And they said because basically is that you're going to have lots of misunderstandings because you're not going to understand this book. It wasn't written that way. It wasn't intended to be written that way. And the truth is they took that actually from the Hebrew Bible, which also was not meant to be written without understanding. You see, to the Hebrew Bible, there's an entire aspect of unwritten rules that were never put in there on purpose. Okay? That was done on purpose from its inception. Now, if you don't know that and you're reading it and going, oh, well, it says this here, it says this here, and you, without understanding the, in a sense, it's like doing Dungeons and Dragons by reading one book without understanding all the compendiums that come with them and understanding how each one fits with the other one. One by itself, all of a sudden you can come up with really bad ideas and really false ideas. And that's what happens to a lot of people.
Examples in both the Bible and the Quran of God-approved murder, God-approved rape, and God-approved slavery. But we still know that...
And all those things that are God-approved in terms of those issues, if God-approved, are God-approved. One of the famous stories that is celebrated by the Jews is the story of Purim. Basically, Esther becomes the hero of the story. She's taken as the queen by this king, I think it's Xerxes, and basically she ends up saving the people. But her sacrifice is being married to this horrible man. And that's her sacrifice. You'll say, how could a just God allow that to happen? Right? Where's God to save them, just like he did during the 10 plagues in Egypt, and help him out and pull Esther out of that horrible situation? I can't answer that question. We can't answer and understand everything. And as a human being, I wouldn't necessarily pretend to try to understand everything. The question isn't that. The question is, can I understand enough to be able to see aspects of the universe that actually fit into this truth or to fit into that truth? And that's more the questions you want to ask yourself. Did the universe come about from nothingness? Did it create itself? Or was there a creator that created it? That's really a fundamental question between atheist and theist. There's much more deeper ideas that you have to go to first before you get to any of these later ideas. It's like starting the chapter of the book and starting on page 200 and start reading the book from 200. Forget about the first 200 pages. Just read from 200 on. You're going to be missing a lot. And that's what's going on. And this type of atheistic argument is missing the entire inception of what you're talking about from the very beginning to understand something.
That murder, rape, and slavery aren't cool, even though at one point or another, according to these books, God was clearly okay with it. So if it is indeed immoral to murder and rape people, that dude is obviously not the guy who came up with that rule.
Now again, it depends again how you define murder, rape, and slavery. And it depends how you define these things. And if you believe they're morally wrong, why? If you're an atheist, why is slavery wrong? It benefits us greatly, gives us lots of money, helps the population. And by the way, I'm not talking about slavery being in terms of any particular people. I'm talking about the concept of slavery that was around during the times of Romans. You would capture people, make them slaves, bam, it was great. But that's not a question of morality from the aspect of whether there's a God or not. And you have to look at this. Who got rid of slavery? What was the motivation? What were the arguments that got rid of slavery? It came from the aspect of God. So the very nature that he quotes the idea of slavery as being okayed by the Bible are the very people that argued against slavery all during the abolitionist idea that use the same Bible as the means that this is wrong. So, the aspect again is picking and choosing without understanding context.
Perhaps you're not a Jew or a Christian or a Muslim and you propose a convenient God that just happens to be in favor of everything we think is good.
And here it is. Did you hear that? It was my beautiful... This is the reason why I did this video, by the way. It was that one line. Supposing you can get a religion where everything that we think is good becomes good. Wow. Talk about narcissistic and egocentric. Throughout history and ages, everybody thought they'd do it good. Stalin thought he was good. Pol Pot thought he was good. Hitler thought he was good. Everybody thinks they're good, and it's a very important concept to understand. When you do marriage therapy, and you have a man and woman, or men and men, or woman and woman that come to you, the fact remains that when they walk in that room, each one thinks they're doing good. That doesn't make it so, but each one believes it. So here you are in a standpoint of saying, I'm going to create a God that I'm going to tell him what good is. Well, guess what? You just became God. From that definition. You're now defining morality. Your book of morality was just written.
Because you think objective morals imply the existence of some kind of God. Now I will probably concede that if you're talking about a two-column list of what to do and what not to do, that would probably imply an author of those lists. But I don't think that's how the world works, and I don't think most people live as if that's how the world works.
Except the fact is, it's exactly how most people live the world. That's how the world works. There is the aspect of the way that people view good and bad and morality. There is the idea of immortal soul. The reason why Muslims will go onto an airplane and blow themselves up is not because they're bad people. They believe what they're doing is good. They're dying for a cause that they, in their heart, is this greatest idea of being able to die in the name of God. Now, we may disagree and say we think that's wrong, and we can have a disagreement about that mindset. But their mindset is not one of being evil. And the same thing when atheists do specific things throughout history in the name of their good. They didn't think they were being evil either. But it led to some very bad things that we consider bad in our lives. Whether or not morality is going to be ultimately, if you believe in morality, up to God to decide. If you're an atheist, then there's no decision. The person died, it's over, there's nothing to talk about. There was no moral agency, there's no moral compass, there's no moral anything. Whatever you got away with, you got away with. Whatever you didn't get away with, you paid for. But the idea of good and bad is an arbitrary construct that has no real meaning. It's whether or not it led to you good things or bad things.
In fact, the people that do are usually considered assholes. For example, there are people that think it's immoral to have an abortion, and obviously they think God is the author of that rule. But obviously not everybody agrees with that, including people of the same religion as them.
And this is a great point, and it's absolutely true. There are differences of opinion when it comes to morality, specifically in terms of interreligious ideology. And there are reasons for this, because there are arguments and understanding of the doctrines themselves and what applies and what doesn't apply. You see, the nature of morality could change, but it doesn't change whether or not, if you believe in God, there's an objective one or not. It just means that we get lost. So yes, we can create a situation where we're doing everything wrong. I'll go back to an example of the first temple, the Jewish temple that supposedly God inhabited during that time period. Now, if that is true, what happened? Well, according to the Jewish belief, what happened was the people started to do sins and doing things wrong in relationship to that temple, which is why it was destroyed. Now, from a moralistic standpoint, the people were going away from God despite the fact that they thought they were doing it in his name. we have a term for this. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. And it's true. It's part of our human condition. We always can go off that path. We always have the capacity. It's part of the aspect in terms of a religious standpoint of why we're here. From an atheist standpoint, there is no reason why we're here. As Richard Dawkins says, we were a happy mistake. So whatever we do or whatever happens has really no meaning. Your life is whatever meaning you make it. And then after it's gone, it's gone. It doesn't make a difference and it was meaningless. On the other hand, if you have a religious standpoint from it, then your life has meaning that's eternal. Okay? And by the way, just because one sounds nicer to the other is not the reason why one is better than the other or one's more right than the other. I'm just trying to say that his argumentation about what he's saying about religion and how he's defining it is absolutely wrong. And the nature by which he's attacking it is absolutely wrong.
Abortion on the okay list or the not okay list? Religion is really bad at answering those kinds of questions.
No, actually, religion is not bad at answering those questions. Religion is very good at it if you understand it. From the Catholic point of view, it's always on the wrong list because Catholicism defines life at conception. So the aspect is that if you believe as a Catholic that life begins at conception, then that would always be wrong. Right? So just take a look at Catholicism for a minute. For Judaism, life does not begin at conception. And they look at a zygote and going into the early part of a fetus as a potential for life. So it has a secondary status. It doesn't have the status of a human being, but it also doesn't have the status of nothing. So they have a very different point of view, which is that you basically, if something is threatening the life of the mother, then you save the life of the mother and would end the pregnancy. Now, where does the life of the mother come into play? Does psychological things come into play? There's where people get into arguments. What does that mean? And where does it go to? And that's where arguments go back and forth. But that doesn't change the fact about the morality. And the fact that morality gets very murky and gets there are deeper ideas to it, there's no problem with that. You could have differences of agreements in morality. It just doesn't change whether or not you believe morality exists or not. And again, what he doesn't ever explain is where does morality come from somebody that's an atheist. The only person I've ever seen try to write about this is Sam Harris. And I have to say, he does a very poor job because very simply, Sam Harris wrote the book that Sam Harris is God and he got to decide morality. He makes, again, arbitrary ideas of what he thinks should be that top goal, which is fine. He has every right to believe the things he believes, but that's not was the belief in every society. See, other societies had different beliefs. Now, if you believe in moral objective values, that morality is an objective standpoint, then that's, if you believe morality is subjective, that you could change it any which way you like, then you're not really talking about morality. Because it's not morals anymore. It's about whatever we decided to be. So if we all decided that killing was okay, that would be moral.
Because the world is not black or white like that. And I know I mentioned murder as something that we could agree was immoral, but could you conceive of a situation in which it was necessary or understandable to murder somebody? Without getting into too much detail, you probably could. I think morality is largely contrived.
Now, perfect. Morality is contrived. If it's contrived, it doesn't exist. That's not morality anymore. You're calling it something else. And again, this is what I believe again. Now, can an atheist live a moral life? Absolutely. But the moral life they're going to be living is based upon the notion that there's an objective moral value. It's as if somebody says, as a philosophy professor told me many years ago, when I had a whole conversation with him in reference to this, he said, I don't believe in God, but I live my life as there is one. And I thought that was a very powerful statement. Because what it told me is that I still have to make decisions in my life, and I think that there has to be one. Because if I don't, then it will go off. And I've noticed that a lot of atheists utilize that in terms of their morality. That even though they themselves don't believe that God exists, so they may say, I know God doesn't exist, they start to live life that there is one anyway, which is almost a little bizarre. Because why do you do that? Well, because it fits into the society that they were born into and the mores that they were already taught. And I think that's why that happens. But sociopaths, psychopaths, do not live that way, nor do they share those moral values. I really believe on some level they're the true atheist, in a sense, where they believe there's no to it.
Whether or not abortion or jaywalking or cannibalism or swearing or any of those things is immoral is largely dependent on the culture and society. But there do seem to be some concepts that we agree on across cultures and across society. Being honest, for example.
Here we go again. I absolutely agree with everything you just said, up until the idea of that we agree in all aspects in all society that being honest. It's not true. There are many cultures and societies that being honest would be absolutely the wrong thing. They teach you to not be honest. In fact, people's feelings are more important than honesty. You are not to tell somebody, in fact, in this culture, honesty is not the best policy. We tell people all the time, don't tell grandma, don't tell her this, it's going to hurt her feelings. We put feelings above honesty. And in fact, that's what's going on in a lot of college campuses today, where people's feelings are more important than being honest, which is why people are being shut down. So this aspect that honesty is more important is just not even true.
There are a lot of assholes in the world, but it seems like everyone agrees that being honest is a good thing. Is that
Again, no, everyone does not agree about that.
because someone instructed us to be honest? I think that morality is based in part in our biological survival.
Now, again, he said two things here very quickly, and I want to hit both. The first one he says is about the idea that, did we get that because we want to be honest? And it's funny because children naturally are not honest. They will lie naturally to get out of situations. If you tell your child something, no, I didn't do that, even though you have them a video watching them do it. Because the natural inclination is to get yourself out of trouble and avoid pain. So the aspect of lying is actually more natural than honesty. Right? That was George Washington's story, so famous. I cannot tell a lie, Dad. I chopped down the cherry tree. Here, bend me over and give me my wax. Because the reality was that was abnormal. And the reason why that story became so famous, whether true or not, which it probably wasn't, but whether it was or not, the aspect is that they were trying to say his character of George Washington was so amazing that even as a child, that's what he would do. So, again, that's the aspect of honesty in that it was not natural. And the second thing he said is he thinks that there's a moral compass in all of us. Now that I agree with 1,000,000%. The question is, why is it there? No other animal has it. If human beings are just intelligent animals, then why do we have a moral compass?
But that doesn't really work here because there's situations in which being dishonest could benefit you and the people around you. But I think for most people in those situations, it would still feel wrong. Even if
I wish that was the case. No, not everybody feels wrong by lying to people. I remember running a group specifically where a client was explaining why his girlfriend can't cheat on him, but he gets to cheat on her, and he had no problem lying to her about it anyway at all. It didn't make him feel anything. And he had no issues at all. So this idea of whether or not somebody's going to feel this way or not is going to depend on that moral compass and how much it's developed or not. And there are people that have very, very limited or non-developed moral compasses, where they come about things or they were taught things from a very young age that they have rights and entitlements to things. And they don't have these issues with those feelings.
it was necessary. Why is that? Well, I think it's because of empathy. I mentioned before that I think people have the propensity to be selfish and petty, but I think that everybody wants to be happy. And I think that deep down we understand that happiness at the expense of other people isn't really happiness.
Happiness at the expense of other people isn't really happiness. Would that be during the entire time that slavery took place in the United States that everybody was unhappy? I don't think that's true. I don't think that people could not be unhappy at the expense of everybody else's unhappiness. I don't think these are true statements. It's nice to say it, doesn't make it true.
Actually practice that is a different story, but I think that's why dishonesty feels wrong even if it's necessary. It's the same reason why when we cuss somebody out at work, we have to make an excuse, like, oh, I was having a bad day. Just because we know that's not normally a good thing to do, we just know it. We don't have to be told, we know it.
No, we developed a moral compass in a society that told us about our values, which then determined that. There are certain people that have no problem cursing anybody else and don't feel bad about it at all. This idea that everybody feels this way and everybody shares these values is just not true.
We want to be happy and we want everybody else to be happy because that makes us the happiest.
We want to be happy and we want to make other people happy, and that makes us the happiest. You ever hear the term misery loves company? I'm confused. That goes exactly the opposite of what he just said. Because, again, when you're talking in these absolutes, there are no absolutes. None of these things are absolute. And that's where these problems come about.
Can we ignore this and pursue selfish goals? Well, of course, just like religious people can do shitty things in the name of God. But this question has always baffled me, because even when I was a Christian, I never had to go flip through the Bible to check and see if it was okay to be nice to people or tell the truth. I just knew it. And if
Again, you didn't learn your value systems by reading through the Bible, as very few people ever do. The Bible in itself gave a framework for the idea that there's a God that exists, and then it made you ideologically have the idea that there's a right and a wrong, and that once there's a right and a wrong that's established, then the aspect is of what is that right and wrong and whether or not you have to follow it. But without that framework, there is no right and wrong. It's my best interest or not my best interest. And we'd be a very different species. We would act very, very differently if we came about it from that mindset. And we see that in human behavior and societies and the way that other societies ran. Again, we're very Judeo-centric, Judeo-Christian-centric, and our philosophy of what's right and what's wrong. And then based upon that Judeo-Christian-centric, we talk about right and wrong like everybody knows this. But it's untrue.
The commandments of some higher power is the only thing keeping you from murdering and raping people, then I'm a little bit disturbed by you, I'm not going to lie.
Now, by the way, I love this. If the only thing keeping you from murdering anybody or killing anybody is that idea about God, then I'm disturbed by you. Well, guess what? I'm disturbed by all the people that are murdering people right now, that are happening right now. You know, it's very nice to talk about things from a standpoint of people, again, who are generally grew up in a moral framework. And then say, wow, it's amazing. But when people don't grow up in a moral framework, the ability to do that is much easier. Why not? Animals don't think about killing. They have no thought process about it. There's no issue about that. We could be much more animalistic in our behaviors. Don't believe me? Look around at people that do it and actually work from that animalistic mindset. All they have to do is say, it's my survival. It's them or me. And watch what human beings can turn into.
Just me though. What should the next video be about? Drop a comment.
So again, I want to thank him for making the video, because I think it was a good fodder for being able to have a conversation. But I hope that you like this video. I hope you'll share it. I hope that you will tell me if you disagree with anything I said and why. I'd love to hear that. And again, if you haven't already subscribed, please do, and become a patron to this as well if you like, at the Subcribe-star below. I hope you have a good night and good mental health.